And I'm Trina. We're going to light our chalice this weekend. As we light our chalice, we share our church covenant. We promise to listen and to learn together with compassion, curiosity, and an open mind. Engage in creating a warm and welcoming community. Work together and beyond our walls to address the social and environmental challenges with our time, talent, and treasure. Support our church and its mission.
Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. Whatever your identity or your religious persuasion, you are welcome here. We come with open hearts and open minds, a community of souls seeking friendship as we journey together toward a better understanding of the spiritual meaning in our lives. May our journey lead us to know the true meaning of justice, compassion, and forgiveness. Welcome, one and all. Please join in the singing of our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit, by UU Jim Scott, who performed at the church a couple of years ago.
We now turn to our portion of the service where we share the gifts that we have been given. And while we were able to gather in person during the regular before times, we would have one collection plate each month that we would share with some organization out in the world. Since we've been going virtually, the amount given to those organizations has dropped by a lot. So we've taken to reminding you each week. But please only feel called if you're able to give, to do it once. You can send your donation into the church at 17 West Maple Street, Hinsdale, 60521. You can go on our website and click the donate button and just write Third Unitarian Pop-Up Pantry in the social action slot that's there. Here's a video now from this month's recipient, which is Third Unitarian's Pop-Up Pantry.
Hi, my name is Michael Caldy from Third Unitarian Church in Chicago, and I wanted to talk to you briefly today about our pop-up pantry in Austin on the west side. And I've only been a member at Third Unitarian Church for about a year now, but this social action has been a big part of our experience in the church, and it's been a great addition to worship there. So the pop-up pantry was just an initiative that was started by a couple of members during COVID-19 when we saw there was just an extreme need for food and for assistance for all sorts of folks. And we wanted to give back to this community that's given us so much, where our building is in Chicago. And so we started the pantry in June of 2020, and it was a choice pantry for people to come up and get whatever food they wanted, but we didn't just serve food as well. It's a big priority for us to also give out household items that are hard for people to get. For example, diapers, we had homemade masks, cleaning supplies, light bulbs, and tampons, pads, all these sorts of items beyond food that people might have trouble getting and need to get by week to week. So as summer moved to fall, we stopped doing the pantry in person. It got too cold, and we moved over the winter to just doing giveaways and reaching out to our neighbors to be able to pack bags for them and give them the food that they need, which we did over the holidays. And this effort now into 2021, we are looking towards relaunching in the spring, and we could use as much of your support as you can manage to get that going again. We've partnered with a local church to work on this effort, and we've been learning from our neighbors and our community throughout the way. So any support you can give would be enormously helpful, and I'm excited to get the Choice Pantry back up and running once it gets warmer. Thank you.
Hello, I'm David Mrazek, serving on the board of the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. I grew up coming to this church, moved away for around 20 years, then gradually returned after moving back to the area. It's been fascinating to see how the congregation and its leadership has changed during that time. I love how we embrace social justice and environmental issues head on, continue to grow spiritually, each in our own way, and teach our children values that will sustain them with meaning and purpose. This is a time in our service where we acknowledge and support the good work and good trouble our congregation engages in. To help keep this amazing church community evolving into the future, go to our website at hinsdaleunitarian.org and scroll down to the donate button, or send a check to the church office at 17 West Maple Street in Hinsdale. Whatever you can give is greatly appreciated. Now I invite you to say our offering words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all the world. Thank you.
It is fitting that the theme of the sermons this month is mercy. With the events of last year still in our memory, we ask the question, what does mercy mean? Here are words by Rudy Francisco, an African-American spoken word artist who sheds light on its meaning. Harriet Goff will read his poem, which will be followed by a moment of meditation.
She asked me to kill the spider. Instead, I got the most peaceful weapons I could find. I took a cup and a napkin. I caught the spider. I put it outside and allowed it to walk away. If I am ever caught in the wrong place at the wrong place, just alive and not bothering anyone, I hope I am greeted with the same kind of mercy.
Let us share a moment of silence as we ponder these words of mercy. Sit comfortably with your feet on the floor. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in awareness and breathe out charity. Breathe in understanding and breathe out compassion. Breathe in love and breathe out forgiveness. May we know mercy and have the courage to use it when we see harm's way. Please join in the singing of Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Last month, Reverend Pam presented a wonderful sermon on poetry and its place in our lives. As was mentioned, poetry helps us to lower the guardrails that allow us to experience our lives more fully. Today, we will look at the growing popularity of spoken word poetry. It seems especially appropriate to present this topic during Black History Month, as for 250 years, much of Black poetry has broadened the American poetry lexicon. Langston Hughes, who died in 1967, wrote this poem you are about to hear. It speaks of the longevity of the African presence in our world and the depths of their spirituality. It is entitled "The Negro Speaks of Rivers," and it will be read by Harriet Goff.
The Negro speaks of rivers. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep, like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep, like the rivers.
They come, they listen, and some come to compete. The mostly young and some not so young come for poetry in coffee houses, libraries, and much larger venues like Sunken Garden in Connecticut that boasts 3,000 in attendance. Dodge Fest, a 4-day biennial event in New Jersey, attracts thousands. Germany, India, and Chicago, they gather all over the world in what is called poetry slams. And it is a revolution. The revolution of spoken word poetry that has taken off even in the classroom as teachers use spoken word to teach poetry. Students are finding that poetry is a way to express their feelings about their own complex lives. Their peers can identify with what they hear, and they realize that they are not alone. It brings them closer to each other with new understandings of their own lives and perhaps new ways to know compassion. In the 60s, Mark Smith, author of 2 books on spoken word, started the Sunday night poetry slams at Green Mill in Chicago. During the week, he was a high school teacher. In January this year, the Chicago Shakespeare Theater sponsored a high school poetry slam. The 250 students who participated represented 39 high schools from not only Chicago and the suburban area, but Huntley and Marengo, Illinois. Each high school group presented its own interpretation of portions of Hamlet in spoken word poetry. I watched it and I was absolutely stunned by the energy, the maturity, and the creativity that embodied their performances. And in spite of doing the show virtually, years afterwards, many of the students expressed not only the fun they had in doing it, but more importantly, the closeness they felt with their diverse peers. So what exactly is spoken word? It is the term used to include many styles of poetry, including hip hop, rap, and even beatboxing, the sounds made with your mouth like something I learned recently. More specifically, spoken word performance is performance poetry. It is free verse and is characterized by play on words and phrases, fast pacing, leading to emotional heights. And you are familiar with it. If you have seen the musical Hamilton, you have heard it. If you have seen Amanda Gorman say her poem at Biden's inaugural ceremony, you have heard it. In her poem, The Hill We Climb, Gorman places words and phrases in juxtaposition to each other, as in the phrase, quiet isn't always peace. And another phrase, the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. Relating to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, she said it was a force that would rather shatter our nation than share it. And her last lines, for there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. It takes your breath away. It moves you. And that is the impact of the spoken word that spoken word can transmit from the heart to the ear. Today's spoken word poems are not read in precisely measured meters, stanzas, or couplets, as we traditionally understand poetry to be, or not to be. But there is still structure that enables the words to flow, and they flow out of and are guided by the emotional energy of the poet. In many ways, spoken word has been influenced by the cadences and rhythms heard in the sermons of Black preachers. Francisco, whose poem you heard earlier, and Joshua Bennett, who you will see in a few moments, both attribute their inspiration to their church preachers. Spoken word has a long history with the Beat generation, where the need to break chains of convention was seen not only in their lifestyle, but in their art and poetry as well. Through the 70s and 80s, the civil rights movement challenged our awareness of the oppression and struggles of African Americans. And as opportunities opened, young Black youth came out in the 90s with creative ways to express their frustrations and hopes in the form of hip hop and rap, a style that at the time to my age group seemed edgy and in your face. But spoken word it seemed much too fast for me to catch up on all the words. So I wasn't too attracted to it back then. But what an ingenious way to grab attention. And I am still learning to appreciate the honesty and the intent from where it comes. Today, hip hop and rap continue to be an important segment of the spoken word genre. And like everything else that grows and seeks due paths, hip hop and rap are evolving. It will be interesting to see where it all leads. My first encounter with spoken word was a presentation given by spoken word artist Joshua Bennett at the Chautauqua Institution a year and a half ago. On this particular day, Joshua presented his spoken word art to an audience of almost 5,000 people. After his presentation, I said to myself, I need to bring this to church. So barring all the problems of logistics, finances, schedules, I bring him to you via YouTube. This first poem is a poem dedicated to his 10th grade teacher and he offers a short introduction. Here is Ode to a 10th grade English teacher.
I was very, very young. And so I wrote a new piece to bring here to you all. My next book is called Ode, O-W-E-D, and it's a book of celebration for all the people, places, and things that made me who I am. And so this is for my 10th grade English teacher, Miss Sims, who actually just transformed my life. You know, I spent most of my childhood in schools that were underfunded. You know, and so by the time I got to this elite private school in Rye, New York, I didn't have a lot of the basic tools I needed to be successful. Miss Sims saw me, and she saw a ton of potential, and she invested a lot of her time. And so whenever I step in front of my lecture hall at Dartmouth, you know, at this beautiful school in Hanover, New Hampshire, I think about her. And I think about every teacher that saw a kid that didn't have a great shot at the beginning and believed I could be whatever I wanted and told me so to my face and followed through. So for every one of you, whatever you take from this, if not just, you know, the Beyonce story, make that sort of investment in someone's life if you can, because I promise it'll make all the difference in the world. So this is Ode to the 10th grade English teacher. I was 14 and had just learned what a thesis statement was like a week ago. I was a decade plus in schools too poor to afford books with all the pages intact, and somehow by 10th grade, I was 2 buses, 1 train, 1 mile walk away from an elite academic scholarship-funded education, which also meant that for the entire first semester of my freshman year, I was detention every day. I was a 5 a.m. alarm clock each morning and still late for homeroom, friends. I was on the cusp of flunking everything. Conceptual physics, global history, Spanish 1, you name it. Each day forgetting what brought me there in the first place, and then came you. Then came Morrison and Chaucer and Shakespeare and Baldwin in the same breath. Then came comments on my report card saying things like, Joshua Bennett is a witty elocutionist. And I had no idea what that last word meant. So I looked it up, because that's what my mother made me do whenever I was faced with the unfamiliar. And of course, you were not my mother. But you were fashioned from the same starshine fabric as she, and you wore your historical brilliance that way. Miss Sims, first of her name, breaker of generational curses and systemic self-doubt, lover of Motown, advocate for boys and girls hailing from the underground of this world of access and wealth, those of us who were not supposed to be anywhere near the great American canon, Latin and Greek, close reading 19th century text with postmodern technique, race, gender, class, no longer cast as secondary concerns. Who we were, inside and out, was now the subject at hand, was central to the discussion and altogether sacred text, this skin, this hair, this crescendo in our chest, this story in the flesh we held that the world despised, but you called holy. And this made all the difference, is what I keep trying to say to anyone who will listen. This one woman bellowing back to an entire history made to make us let go of our slang, our faith, our mind in moments of doubt or fear. This prophet stood, this shimmering shield saying brilliant, saying creative, saying this draft is good, but the next one will be fantastic, saying to be a writer, you have to be a reader first. And no, you did not have to teach us that books are time machines. We knew that already. We knew every vocab word you taught us was a single brick in a dream so big we could hide everyone we loved inside of it. We knew that we would never have to be alone again, that we were shining points in a cloud of witnesses with names nothing like our own, sharing our journey across the ages, and it was you who opened the door, who unbolted the window in our minds and let the blue jays in. In spite of it all, you dared to call us possible. And so we were. And so we took to the air and lived. Thank you.
Joshua received his undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania, graduating magna cum laude and as a member of Phi Beta Kappa. As a Marshall Scholar, he received his master's degree at University of Warwick in England in theater and performance. He returned to the United States, applied to Princeton, graduated from Princeton with a PhD in English. Presently, Joshua is assistant professor of English and creative writing at Dartmouth College. He is the author of 4 books and recipient of many awards for his writing and poetry. In this poem, the words reveal the struggles of identity experienced by African Americans living in a white-dominated culture, and reveals the power of words to uplift.
And one of them's about my dad, who's my favorite person, in part because he's so intense. Like one time, he's a Marine, and so we were locked out of our house. I don't know how that ties to this story. Well, I guess his intense athleticism. So we got locked out of the house, and my father scaled the side of our house, broke into the bathroom window, and casually opened the front door. Which is why I became a poet. I just couldn't become an athlete after that. Do you see what I'm saying? That there were just these large-scale feats being performed in front of me for so long that I had to switch it up, you know? I had to do something different. So this poem is actually tied to that too, and it's tied to high school in particular for me, and my process of becoming an educator. So when I first graduated from Princeton, and I got out into the world, I was shocked at how often people use the language of diversity and inclusion to not see each other. It seemed to me like the strangest thing. So, no, I'm serious. It was very odd. And so I would go for, a job talk or, a lecture, and people would say, "Oh, are you the new diversity hire?" And I'll say, "No, I'm Joshua, actually. I'm here to talk to you all about American literature, and, I have a book out." Like, they didn't just find me on the street, They're like, "Oh, there is a very dashing young African-American man. Let's bring him in here to teach our students that pay $60,000 a year." I mean, it just doesn't work like that, right? And so I realized that there were just all this shorthand that people had inherited to just talk about human difference, to talk about all the incredible different ways we show up in the world, right, in our individual ways. And so I wrote this poem, and it's called "Token Sings the Blues." And it's for anyone that's ever had part of your identity used to flatten you, rather than just as one facet, of who you are, which is a human being in history, just trying to figure it out, and take care of somebody, including yourself. So this is Token Sings the Blues. I see you. You always or almost always only one in the room. Yeah, maybe two. 3 is a crowd. 3 is, wow, there's so many of you. 3 will get you confused with people that look nothing like you. You get called Devin or Sheila. Your name isn't Devin or Sheila. You do your best not to ignore such casual erasure. You know silence will be taken as affirmation, praise even, and you're always affirmative. You're an affirmative action figure. You fantastic first black friend. You first ballot quota keeper. You almost cry when your history professor says, you know, in this country, the gold standard used to be people. Funny how no one comes right out and says things like you people anymore. It's all code words like thug or diversity hire. You diversity all by yourself. You contain multitudes and are yet contained everywhere you go, confined, like there's always someone watching you and isn't there. And isn't that the entire point of this flesh you inherited? This unrepentant stain. Be twice as good, your mother says, as if what anyone else has is worth your panic, worth measuring your very life against, and you always remember to measure your hair, your volume, your tone over email. You perpetually sorry. You don't know why. You apologize to no one in particular just for being around and in your body at the same time. They tell you your body is the real problem. You monster, you beast of burden, you beast and burden, you horse but human, you centaur, you map the stars and pull back your bow to shoot the moon and its one good white eye. You are enough. You are brilliant. You are beautiful. You are everything, your big sister says. And on your best days above ground, you believe her. Thank you. Thank you all.
The last video is America Will Be, a celebration of Joshua's father's strength and the optimism in light of all his father's harsh experiences.
So this is America Will Be, after Langston Hughes. I am now at the age where my father calls me brother when we say goodbye. Take care of yourself, brother. He whispers a half-beat before we hang up the phone, and it is as if some great bridge has unfolded over the air between us. He is 70 years old. He was born in the throat of Jim Crow, Alabama, one of 10 children, their bodies side by side in the kitchen each morning, like a pair of hands exalting. Over breakfast, I ask him to tell me the hardest thing about going to school back then, expecting a history I have already memorized. Boycotts and attack dogs, fire hoses, Bull Connor and his personal tank, candy paint shining white as a Confederate ghost. He says, honestly, probably having to read the Canterbury Tales. He says, eating lunch alone. These days, I hear the word America and think first of my father's loneliness, of the hands holding pens that stabbed him as he walked through the hallway, unclenched palms settling onto a wooden desk, taking notes, trying to pretend the shame didn't feel like an inheritance. You say democracy. And I see men holding documents that sent him off to war a year later, Motown blaring from a country boy's bunker as napalm scarred the sky into jigsaw patterns, his eyes open wide as the blooming blue heart of the light bulb in a Crown Heights basement where he and my mother will dance for the first time, their bodies swinging like rockets in the impossible dark. And yes, I know, This is more than likely not what you mean when you sing liberty, but it is the only kind I know or can readily claim. The times where those hunted by history are underground and somehow still daring to love what they cannot hold or fully fathom, when a stranger is not a threat, but the promise of a different ending. I woke up this morning and there were men on television lauding a wall big enough to box out an entire world. Families torn with the stroke of a pen, citizenship little more than some garment that can be stolen or reduced to cinder at a tyrant's whim. My father knows this, grew up knowing this, witnessed firsthand the firebombs, the Klan, multiple messiahs, love-soaked and shot through, somehow still believes in this grand, blood-stained experiment, still votes, still prays that his children might make a life unlike anything he has ever seen. He looks at me like the promise of another cosmos. And I never know what to tell him. All of the books in my head have made me cynical and distant, but there's a choir in him that calls me forward. My disbelief, built as it is from the bricks of his belief, not in any America you might see on network news or hear heralded before the start of a football game, but in the quiet power of Sam Cooke singing, he was born by a river that remains unnamed, that he runs alongside to this day, some vast and future country, some nation within a nation, black as candor, loud as the sound of my father's unfettered laughter over cheese, eggs, and coffee, his eyes shut tight as armories, his fists finally unclenched as if he were invincible. Thank you. Thank you all.
The number of people who stayed afterward for the question and answer session was almost 90%. Usually many people leave to go to lunch early so they can get a good seat at the next lecture. This was indeed a tribute to Joshua's presentation. And that is spoken word. Say it, sing it. Here is a short video of 4 young men singing their spoken word interpretation of Lift Every Voice and Sing. The poem was written by James Johnson in 1900 and put to music 5 years later by his brother, John. In 1912, as head of the NAACP, this song was referred to as the Black National Anthem, 19 years before the Star-Spangled Banner was adopted. As you listen, try not to pay attention to the untimely fire sirens in the background. And these young men held it together.
Yo, what's up? It's your boy Rael.
It's Buddha.
Tice. Far. And we're in print. Hey man, Martin Luther King Day is today. And we just want to kick something real quick. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let all rejoicing rise. High as the listening skies, let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of faith and darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of hope and the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on to victory is won.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world.
Here is a poem by spoken word poet Dorothea Grossman. I bought plum blossoms, more for the name than for the color. I pick lipstick that way too. In other words, if it sounds like a poem, I'll take it.